Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and this is part 5 of Louie Gohmert's document on the corruption of Robert Mueller, or I think he calls it Robert Mueller Unmasked. And it really is showing exactly who Mueller is. And this particular part is about the framing of Scooter Libby. Now, I was going to tack this on the end of the previous one, but it really needs to be a standalone because there's a lot to it. And I do have a ton of tabs open. You know me, that's how it works. So I'm going to try to get to them all. We'll see. But I will put the links down below. Just as usual, everything will be down there in case you want to do a little more research on this. Remember, I'm a teacher at heart, so I'm hoping sometimes some of you will, take some of that information and even dig deeper on it and put what you find in the comments. Let us know what you're finding because there's more to it than, I can include in a 20-30 minute video. Anyway, before I get started, I want to address one issue, and that is the IG report on Comey and his leaking the memos. Okay, now it came out that from what I understand, I've not seen the IG report, but from what I'm hearing on the news, that the IG did recommend criminal charges for Comey, but the DOJ declined. Now, here's possible reasons. Now, I'm not saying this is fact, but I'm saying this is what I think probably is the situation. Okay, now, the DOJ is run by Bill Barr. Bill Barr knows what's in Horowitz's IG report on the FISA abuse. He already knows. I'm pretty positive on that, like 99.9% sure, because it's already done and it's currently making the rounds of what has to be redacted. Okay, so that's the status of that, and it should be coming out pretty soon because I think it was done at the beginning of July. So it's been making the rounds. And that's kind of standard procedure, how they have to do it to make sure everything's redacted like it needs to be. So I think what happened was AG Barr looked at the case for Comey and the leaking memos and thought, well, yeah, I could probably assign some prosecutors and time and energy and resources. It's just not a good use of them. Because what's coming up in this FISA abuse report and the prosecutions that are going to be a result of that, I'm going to need every hand on deck. So why bother getting Comey on essentially like a parking ticket fine when he's going to be tried for treason? Okay? It's not that it's not important. Yes, leaking this stuff was important, but what's coming up is so much bigger that why spend the time, energy, resources getting him on that minor charge when you know he's going to be facing this big charge and there's no way he's going to get out of it. It's a slam dunk, okay? But this other, it's not necessarily a slam dunk, okay? There are some gray areas in regards to the whole Comey leaking the memos. So that is not necessarily a slam dunk. And why would you want to do that and really tie up resources that are going to be needed for what's to come with the FISA abuse? Okay, so that is my opinion on it. I don't know if that's accurate, but it seems to be in line with what Lindsey Graham was saying in the Hannity clip. So I think George Papadopoulos here, says not getting prosecuted for leaks is one thing. Being prosecuted for entrapment and conspiracy to defraud a FISA court is a whole other animal. And I think that's really the situation we're seeing. Okay? So just wanted to put that in. All right, let's get back to Scooter Libby. Okay, first of all, the guy's name is not really Scooter. It's his first name only goes by an I, the letter I, but there are speculations on it, but I couldn't find anything really definitive on it. I didn't really dig hard on that one because it's not that important. And his first name is Louis, or his middle name is Louis, and they call him Scooter. And actually, there's a guy I know that a lot of the people that knew him when he was young call him Scooter. So, yeah, and his first name's Tim. Why? I don't know. And his explanation, he was actually asked that in the grand jury. That was the first question they asked him. And he said, well, it's just that I'm from the South and it's not that uncommon in the South. That was his explanation. So that's why it's Scooter Libby. Anyway, so let's talk about Scooter Libby, because this is another one of Mueller's hatchet jobs. Yep. In 2003, during yet another fabricated and politically charged FBI investigation, this one searching for the leak of CIA agent Valerie Plame's identity to the media, Robert Mueller's very dear close friend, James Comey, was at the time serving as, get this, Deputy Attorney General. Yeah. Comey convinced then Attorney General John Ashcroft that he should recuse himself from the Plame investigation. At the time, Ashcroft was in the hospital. So, and there's a picture of Scooter Libby. After Deputy AG Comey was successful in securing Ashcroft's recusal, is this sounding familiar? Comey then got to choose the special counsel. He then looked about for someone who was completely independent of any relationships that might affect his independence, and settled upon his own child's godfather and named Patrick Fitzgerald to investigate the source of the leak. So much for the independence of the special counsel. Yeah, did you get that? This was his child's godfather. That's who he named. Oh, no conflict of interest there. The entire episode was further revealed as a fraud when it was later made public that Special Prosecutor Fitzgerald, FBI Director Mueller, and Deputy Attorney Comey had very early on learned that the source of Plame's identity leak came from Richard Armitage. But neither Comey nor Mueller nor Fitzgerald wanted Armitage's scalp. See? They knew ahead of time. Oh no, these so-called apolitical, fair-minded pursuers of their own brand of justice were after a bigger name in the Bush administration, like Vice President Dick Cheney or Karl Rove. Yet they knew from the beginning that these two men were not guilty of anything. They knew nobody was, except for Richard Armitage. Ugh. So, nonetheless, Fitzgerald, Mueller, and Comey pursued Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby, as a path to ensnare the vice president. According to multiple reports, Fitzgerald had twice offered to drop all charges against Libby if he would deliver Cheney to him. There was nothing to deliver. Is any of this sounding familiar? Could it be that these same tactics have been used against an innocent General Mike Flynn? Could it be that Flynn only agreed to plead guilty to prevent any family members from being unjustly prosecuted, and to also prevent going completely broke from attorney's fees? That's the apparent Mueller-Comey special counsel distinctive modus operandi. Yep. And I want to say, remember, this is no conspiracy theorist. This is Louie Gohmert saying this, a man who has witnessed these things, who has known what's going on behind the scenes because he's a member of Congress, and he's been a member of Congress, and he saw it firsthand. So this is not just some wacko person. This is somebody who really knows. Libby would not lie about Cheney, so he was prosecuted for obstruction of justice, perjury, making a false statement. Do these sound familiar? This Spectator report in 2015 sums up this particularly egregious element of the railroading. And there's the link for it. Remember, with the links, if you download the actual document, and it's down below in the description, you may have to look around to get the description to pop open, but it's down there in the description. You can download this, and you can click on those links then, and you can read the articles. By the time Scooter Libby was tried in 2007, it wasn't for anything to do with the Plame leak. Everyone then knew Armitage had taken responsibility for that, but for lying to federal officials about what he had said to 3 reporters, including Miller. Now, it is relating to this part of the story that an extraordinary new piece of information has come to light. After her spell in prison, and with her job on the line, now Miller was a reporter, and she spent time in prison for contempt of court because she wouldn't reveal her source. Okay, So that's what they're talking about there. Miller was eventually worn down to agree to hand over some redacted portions of notes of her few conversations with Libby. Several years on, she could no longer recall where she had first heard of Plame's CIA identity, but her notes included a reference to Wilson alongside Wilson was Valerie Plame's husband. Several years on, she could no longer recall where she had first heard of Plame's CIA identity, but her notes included a reference to Wilson, alongside which the journalist had added in brackets, "Wife works in bureau?" Question mark. After Fitzgerald went through these notes, it was put to Miller that this showed that the CIA identity of Plame had been raised by Libby during the noted meeting. At Libby's trial, Miller was the only reporter to state that Libby had discussed Plame. That was the big witness there. This was what they were writing everything on, that she discussed this identity with Libby at this time. Well, she was the only reporter to state that. His conviction and his sentencing to 30 months in prison and a $250,000 fine rested on this piece of evidence. But Miller has just published her memoirs. Everybody's got books. Ugh. One detail in particular stands out. Since the Libby trial, Miller has read Plame's own memoir and there discovered that Plame had worked at a State Department bureau as cover for her real CIA role. The discovery, in Miller's words, left her cold. The idea that the bureau in her notebook meant CIA had been planted in her head by Fitzgerald. That's the prosecutor, okay? The godfather of Comey's child. It was a strange word to use for the CIA. Reading Plame's memoir, Miller realized that bureau was in brackets because it related to her working at State Department. Yeah. What that means is that Scooter Libby had not lied as she originally thought and testified. He was innocent of everything, including the contrived offense. For his honesty and innocence, Scooter Libby spent time behind bars and still has a federal felony conviction he carries like an albatross. Well, Trump has taken care of that. Now remember, Louie wrote this back in April of 2018, and I think it was April of 2018 when Trump pardoned him. I can't remember exactly when, but I'm pretty sure it was about that time. The real culprit of the allegation for which the special counsel was appointed and massive amounts of taxpayer dollars expended was Richard Armitage. A similar technique was used against Martha Stewart. After all, Mueller's FBI developed both cases. If the desired crime to be prosecuted was never committed, then talk to someone you want to convict until you find something that others are willing to say is not true. Then you can convict them of lying to the FBI. Martha Stewart found out about Mueller's FBI the hard way. Unfortunately, Mueller has left a wake of innocent people whom he has crowned with criminal records. History does seem to repeat itself when it is recording the same people using the same tactics. Can anyone who has ever actually looked at Robert Mueller's history honestly say that Mueller deserves a sterling reputation in law enforcement? One part of his reputation he does apparently deserve is the reputation for being James Comey's mentor. Now, that's all of this document because the rest of it I'm going to show you has to do with different tabs that I have open here. This is from Scooter Libby's bio in Wikipedia, and I wanted to show you this because after Miller had served most of her sentence, which remember she served for not revealing a source, so it was for contempt of court, Libby reiterated that he had indeed given her a waiver both voluntarily and personally because there was some question about whether she had a waiver and she could actually talk or reveal things or something. And he actually had given her that waiver and, it was really kind of strange there. He attached the following letter, which, when released publicly, became the subject of further speculation about Libby's possible motives in sending it. Okay, let's read it. This is what it says. As noted above, my lawyer confirmed my waiver to other reporters in just the way he did with your lawyer. Why? Because, as I'm sure will not be news to you, the public report of every other reporter's testimony makes clear that they did not discuss Miss Plame's name or identity with me, or knew about her before our call. You went to jail in the summer. It is fall now. You will have stories to cover: Iraqi elections and suicide bombers, biological threats, bird flu, and the Iranian nuclear program. Out west, where you vacation, the aspens will already be turning. They turn in clusters because their roots connect them. Come back to work and life. Until then, you will remain in my thoughts and prayers. With admiration, Scooter Libby. Now, to me, I read that and I think, what a nice guy. I mean, this is a guy who is sending this to the one person who gave evidence that he was guilty when he knew he wasn't. And it's like he forgave her and he was sorry that she went to jail for a while. And, I just don't see any other way to read that than he's just a genuinely nice guy and he was extending an olive branch to her. Anyway, I wanted to show that to you. I mean, the whole article is interesting, but keep in mind, who's writing it. So if you want to see some of the actual transcripts, well, this is, I know it's the Wayback Machine here, but that's because the government website kind of shifted around and I'm not sure where they put this particular thing, but this is his indictment right here. So if you want to go through and read it, you can. But essentially there were two major media outlets that were behind it, and I bet you can't guess which two they were. Yep, the Washington Post and the New York Times. Funny how they always seem to be right there in the heart of things. So it was all about, okay, Wilson was this Valerie Plame's husband, and he was sent to Niger. He came back and he said something about there being uranium purchased, and that's back up here. Let me find it. Because Bush mentioned it. Oh, here it is. Okay. On or about January 28th, 2003. That always kills me, the on or about, because it's like he delivered his State of the Union address. Why do we say on or about? Because we know when that happened. It was on January 28th, 2003. And it included 16 words asserting that, here's the quote, the 16 words. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. That was the quote. That's what all this hullabaloo was about. And so the New York Times published a column which said that it disputed the accuracy of the 16 words. Okay? And so then Libby read it, and supposedly he was so upset about it. And I do have some video of his testimony. Now, it doesn't show him, but you can hear the prosecutor asking him questions. And this was before the grand jury. So this was entered into the trial as evidence, but it was grand jury testimony, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Were you angry when you read the article?
Yes, because, angry, I was concerned because it didn't seem to me an accurate portrayal of the facts. But I was also confident that when the facts came out, it would be, it's hard to counter a false accusation even with clear facts. But I was confident that the facts were quite clear, that in fact his cable was not definitive, that we had not asked for the report, that the report did not in fact reach the Vice President or me prior to the State of the Union, and that we were not the people who were putting it into the claim. So the underlying facts I thought were quite solid, saying this was wrong, but it's disturbing to have something like this out there.
Was it fair to say you were upset when you read the article?
There are a lot of articles that come out that say bad things about the administration, and I guess I've gotten a little bit inured to them. But I did not like the article.
Were you upset?
I guess I was upset. I was disturbed by the article, didn't like the article. Upset's a fair word, I guess.
So, anyway, back here, the prosecutor kept asking him, were you angry? Were you upset? And he's like, well, we saw a lot of negative press. You just see that. That's part of the job. And so he wasn't really upset. But the prosecutor really was pushing on that and trying to get him to admit that he was upset. Because what they were trying to do is say that he was so upset that he wanted revenge on this Wilson guy for supposedly giving them this information, and then it wasn't true. So it was like supposed to be a revenge. And you don't get that at all when you're listening to him. I just don't get that. And so that's why he outed this guy's wife. That's what they said. But we now know that's not what happened. And like I said, Armitage confessed. So he said he was the one that leaked her name. And it ended up being that it didn't matter anything that, that her name was out there and that she was connected to the CIA. It did it virtually nothing. It's not like anyone's life was endangered or anything, but the press made it sound like that. Like it was the worst thing under the sun. And it just wasn't. So anyway, I'll leave this. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and I'll leave it down below if you want to actually read it. But just, this poor guy, I just feel so sad for him. Here's the, trial, the federal trial of him. And even from this, remember, Wikipedia is written by the left. So even this makes him still sound guilty, even though he wasn't, and we all know he wasn't. Of course, yes, he was convicted of lying, and let's see, let me go back up here. Here's what he was actually convicted of: obstruction of justice, false statements, and perjury. One of these he wasn't convicted of, so it was only 4 counts that he was convicted of instead of 5. But still, do these sound familiar? Obstruction of justice, false statements, perjury. Yeah, it's the same plan. How they do the same thing over and over. Anyway, here's this too, if you want to read it, the Plame Affair criminal investigation. I mean, it's everywhere. And Patrick Fitzgerald is the guy who Comey appointed. Comey appointed him. Yeah, and again, the New York Times played this starring role because, they always do, and so does the Washington Post. And here's the guy, that's the prosecutor. Yeah. What is the deal? I gotta ask you folks, what's the deal when you look at their faces that they got this V going on? I've known an awful lot of people in my lifetime, and I have never, until they were interviewing Strzok, at the hearing, I have never seen anybody who had this V thing going on with the muscles in their face. I just haven't. And this guy has it, and there was another guy that I just saw recently. It was like, what is going on with these people? I do not know. Anyway, there's even another article on it in Wikipedia. There's 2 of them. One of them's called the Plame Affair Criminal Investigation, and the other one is the Plame Affair. So there you go. I mean, they made such a huge deal about it. Anyway, I will put the link to this down below if you want to. This is an hour of Scooter Libby's grand jury testimony. Now, I want to talk to you just a minute about grand jury testimony, because if you are guilty of something and you know you're guilty, you never testify in front of a grand jury, because the grand jury runs under different rules than a regular court situation. The grand jury, as I understand it, again, not a lawyer, not a paralegal, but this is what I've gleaned after reading articles and stuff on it. But as I understand it, the purpose of a grand jury is not to find out if the person is guilty. The grand jury finds out if there's probable cause. And that's a huge difference from being guilty, beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what a court has to find you if they're going to convict you of it. So a grand jury takes information and they look at it and they say, first of all, was a crime committed? And secondly, is there a reasonable probability that this person did it? So you first of all have to have a crime, and secondly, you have to have somebody that you're looking at. Well, and with grand juries, if you have this is his actual grand jury statement. I don't know how long this is. It's a text document, so who knows? It goes on for a little while, and it's one of several, and I'll show you those in a minute. But this was how they started it out, and they said, well, first of all, is it classified? See, Scooter Libby started out joking. The A here is him, the Q is the questioner. And so his answer, they were talking about, they wanted to ask him about Scooter, and he says, are we classified in here? He was joking. He really thought, and if you listen to him in this video here, well, it's audio, but if you listen to him here, he really honestly sounds like he never imagined that he would be considered guilty. And really, he shouldn't have been. So, they talked about that, and here's the guy, Pat Fitzgerald, is introducing himself as the special counsel. And he talked about, here's the constitutional right to refuse to answer any question if a truthful answer would tend to incriminate you. Now, remember, Scooter Libby is a lawyer. He knew the law, and he understood what it would be like to talk in front of the grand jury, to give testimony there. And he realized that that could be used in any other legal proceeding. That's what they said here. And you should understand that if you choose to answer questions, any answer that you do give can be used against you by the grand jury or in any other legal proceeding. Do you understand that? And he said, I do. And, the Fifth Amendment, he could have said, no, I won't testify to the grand jury. He could have just said no, and he could have stopped at any time. But he didn't. He went on for hours and hours and hours. And I know for sure 8 hours of testimony were entered into the record as part of the evidence in his trial. So you have to wonder, if he was guilty, why in the world did the man keep talking? He's a lawyer. He would have known better. By the way, he was disbarred because of this. This guy lost his world. His world crashed in on him because of this. It was just a horrible, horrible trick. But that's the way Mueller works. And so with this grand jury information and all the other, here are the trial exhibits. And you can go through and click on these, but I will warn you that if you do click on them, that the links will be down below. And, some of them are audio. However, I don't know. It's flash format, it says, but I couldn't get it to come up in my browser. So maybe it would come up in somebody else's, but these are very old. Remember, they're from 2007. And if you were on the internet in 2007, things have changed a lot. A lot since then, especially how they did audio. And then the transcripts, that was the one I showed you, the March 5th one, but there's another transcript here that you can access. Actually, there are several. That's just this one right here. And so there's a lot that you can look at. And so that's how he was spending, this entire time. That was the last one, it appears, because they started down here on January 23rd. So, just tough time for this guy. And it was all because they had some other agenda. Now, I don't specifically know what agenda they had. I don't know necessarily. But I suspect, this is just suspecting, that they were hoping to use the momentum from this, not the leaking of Valerie Plame's name, but I think maybe they were trying to get this whole weapons of mass destruction threat so they could do the Iraqi war. That's what I think really was behind it. And I think, somebody outed something and it just kind of snowballed. They had to have a fall guy, and Scooter Libby was a fall guy. So in a lot of ways, when you're looking at Trump pardoning him, I think there was a real reason. I think Trump did it as a message to them. And this article, I think, is kind of interesting from the New York Times. It was when Trump pardoned Scooter Libby, and it says, Trump pardoned Scooter Libby in a case that mirrors his own. Well, yes, New York Times, it did mirror his own. Yes. And here's where it was talking about Judith Miller, a former New York Times reporter and a key witness at his trial, recanted her testimony And a year later, a court reinstated his law license. So he did get his law license back, but that was in 2015. That's when she recanted her testimony. But 2015, I mean, it happened in 2003. Think about that. I mean, if you've ever had to live under false accusations, it is just horrible. You wake up, you think about it all the time. It's always there. You're thinking about this false accusation that you know isn't true, but it just drains the life out of you. And this poor guy, he's had to go through a lot. He really has. So, yeah, this was an interesting article. This is the article I really want to end with because I think this one is an excellent summary of what happened. You know, when this was in April 13th, 2018, and this is the New York Post, which, remember, is the good one, the more fair one, let's put it that way. And this article right here pretty much sums things up because when they talked about Scooter Libby's crimes, when Trump was getting ready to pardon him, they were talking about him being a leaker. But that's not what the charges were. That's not what he was convicted of. So it had nothing to do with the leaking because we all know who did the leaking. And they knew from the time it happened. So, yeah, it's just they didn't want that person thrown under the bus. And they wanted to make an example of somebody who was close to the vice president. So I really recommend that you read this. And I thought it was very interesting here. Because, you know, good old Jake Tapper put his foot in his mouth. This was when Trump came out and he called James Comey a leaker and liar. And he was talking about pardoning Scooter Libby too. And so this is what Jake Tapper said. Calling at Comey a proven leaker liar while you're about to pardon Scooter Libby, who leaked the identity of a covert CIA employee and was convicted for lying about it to the FBI, well, that's quite a thing. And that was Jake Tapper, CNN. Yep. And it's false. I mean, that's just a big lie. But that's what they wanted people to believe. They were trying to convince people that Libby was guilty and that Trump trying to give this guy a pardon was because he felt he was going to be trapped and he was going to need pardoning. He's going to have to pardon himself. Remember all that? Yeah. So, yeah, it's just, you read through this and you just have the same thing. It's the whole story over and over and over again. That's how it works. And it just frustrates me that this is what we're seeing. But yeah, and I think this says it all right here. Libby was convicted for the political sins of others. Yeah, he was. You know, it wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything wrong, but they needed a patsy, and he was the patsy. And because of that, it threw a big bunch of questioning and targeting of the Bush administration and of Dick Cheney specifically. So now I'm not standing up for them, okay? They did some things that they're going to have to answer for. But this guy, Libby, I don't think he did anything wrong. I really don't. And I think that's why Trump pardoned him. Because it was a sign to the deep state that, hey, I know what you did to Libby. I know who was behind it. I know why you did it. And it's going to stop here and now. I think that's why he pardoned him. So that's my opinion on that. But you know what? Everybody's got an opinion, right? So I don't know. What do you think? I just wanted to give this to you and let you know what was going on. And, you know, Scooter Libby, good guy, I think, that just got in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Mueller took him down. So that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.